When you read books on Revelation, they list out multiple different ways that throughout history and to the modern times, the book of Revelation is interpreted. How would you define and clarify your position in regards to the interpretation of the book of Revelation?
All of the time, my students want to
Sure.
position me in terms of my commentary, this commentary, that commentary, and other writers on Revelation, and what they read on the internet, and what they see on YouTube. It's just I mean, we're inundated, like I said before, by this tsunami wall of
Yep.
interpretation that's coming at us. So it's a natural question. The difficulty that I have is, as probably you can tell, I kind of march to my own drum.
Yep.
A little bit. I'm not so idiosyncratic that you can't understand what I'm saying. Hopefully what I say is synthetic with the New Testament and seems to come out of the New Testament, which is my heart's desire. But also I would say that in terms of positioning myself, it's a complex layer. So let me say, let's put it together with a couple of multiple pieces.
Okay.
First of all, in terms of what John's message is, my basic interpretive approach would be passion millennial. I think John is after faithful witness. I think that's the crisis. I think that's what he's going after in the first century with his 7 churches and what's going on in Asia Minor. And I think that is his major message for any church in any age, the crisis of faith, the crisis of witness. I mean, the difficulty when all of the world is against you in a very real way, not just in subtle ways in terms of social pressure,
Right.
but in terms of governmental ways, like it's against the law to witness for Christ, and those kind of very explicit ways of having persecution and opposition. Right. And I think that his message is clear, passion millennial. But in terms of here's the way I would ask the question. When you read any verse in Revelation, what is the immediate first meaning? I call it first meaning. By that I mean the immediate meaning, what the author intended the original readers to understand. Now, in terms of immediate meaning, I'm preterist. That's a term that's used to describe an interpretation that sees the book of Revelation fulfilled within its first century context,
Right.
or within an earlier context, a historical context in the past. And that's where we get the word preterist. It means past. The problem is suddenly you say, oh my gosh, so you don't think there's anything about the future in the book of Revelation?
Right.
Well, that's the problem with the preterist position. So I'm not a pure preterist, but in terms of basic, solid, good exegesis, when you do exegesis of any verse in the Bible, the first question is, what did it mean to the original author and the original readers? That's a premier principle of hermeneutics. Yep. When Paul wrote 1 Corinthians, we don't ask the question, what does that mean 2,000 years from now? What is its immediate meaning? Its immediate meaning is Corinth. In the time frame that Paul wrote those letters in the mid-50s, with a Corinthian church, a real church. So it's a real author with a real church with the real problems and a real letter that's addressing it. It's concrete. It's right there in that context. Just a huge bulk of the book of Revelation is preterist. Easily, and I try to show in my book how you can interpret through 20 chapters of Revelation as about John's first century context. It's about the 7 churches. I tell my class all of the time, the book of Revelation, in terms of its immediate meaning, it asks the question, what did this mean to Pergamum? What did this mean to Ephesus? What did this mean to Smyrna? What did this mean to Laodicea, so on and so forth? What did this mean to the 7 churches? That's your first meaning. But then, okay, so I'm preterist, but not pure.
Okay.
Why? Because at the same time, I think there is an extended meaning to the book of Revelation. And what I mean by that is, I do think that there is an anticipation by John of an hour of trial for the church. He alludes to this in one of the 7 letters to the 7 churches, and then he references this later. And I think that hour of trial is the Gog and Magog battle at the end of chapter 20 in verses 7 and following, where you get the great Gog and Magog battle that issues into the great white throne of judgment. Okay, so I think that part of Revelation is prophetic of this great conflict where the church will be surrounded, will be persecuted to such a high degree that the very existence of the church is called into question, just like in the life of Jesus. His very existence was called into question by his death on a cross.
Sure.
The Passion millennial position that I hold says that there is a future in the book of Revelation. It is about the future in terms of the message of Gog and Magog, and that message is still the same. Be faithful unto death. And that is how God will conquer evil. And so if you ask me specifically now, how does Gog and Magog and being faithful in a martyred witness for the church conquer evil? I don't know. God told me through the book of Revelation that's how he's doing it.
Right.
But I also don't really know how to explain the cross. I've experienced it. I've been saved by the blood of Jesus Christ, but I just can't tell you exactly how that works.
Sure. It's not an easy equation.
No. And in the same way, I don't think that this end of time scenario with Gog and Magog is an easy thing to explain. Like, exactly how is that going to be God conquering evil? I don't know. But I know he told me that's how he's going to do it, and he's depending on me to be faithful in order to get that done. So at whatever point when we get there, and here's the funny thing, I like to tell my students all the time, you don't need anybody to tell you it's the end time. You don't need anybody to tell you it's the end time. Anybody that knows that they're facing death knows it's the end. And the church corporate won't need any prophets to say, hey, this is the end, because it'll be obvious. I mean, the church will be going out of existence. Just like when Jesus faced the cross, he knew his death was imminent. He didn't have to have a prophet to tell him, hey, do you know you're going to die in a few hours? He needed no prophet to tell him that. And I think for the end time, we'll know it when we get there. So we won't really need any prophecies that help us predict when we're there.
Sure.
It'll be way too obvious that we're there. And so I think there's an extended application. John saw his setting with the crisis of faith for his churches in this demand for ultimate worship by the Roman Empire as a paradigm of what it's going to look like at the end of time, at the end of church history, for the church, when the church will be in an ultimate crisis of the demand for worship, absolute demand for absolute worship, and the church will say no, and the church will die. And I think just like there was the miracle of Easter, I think there's going to be this miraculous thing that God does in that church passion, just like in Jesus' own passion.